Let me tell you a little bit about John. John and I haven't known each other for about 6 months, I think. Mm-hmm. But Bob, you guys heard me refer to Bob numerous times. He said, Tim, when the Lord sends one of them critters, that was one of Bob's favorite words. When the Lord sends one of them critters into your life and you recognize it, you better rush to them and grab hold of them. Well, about 6 months ago, we're on a Zoom call. I'm on a Zoom call with a church in Clarksville. And two of the pastors, and they said, well, we got this lay guy. He's going to call in. He's driving. He's out doing his day job, and he's going to call in. So it was John. And immediately, when he got on the call, the whole energy of everything changed. Because all of a sudden you recognize, man, we got a guy that has a fire for Jesus like nobody. He's one of them critters. So by the time we got done with the call, John was like, okay, look. I think he recognized maybe I had a little bit of one of them critters, I guess. Mm-hmm. So he said, hey, dude, I need to come see you. So he gets in his car the next week, drives over here and spends the whole day with me. And the rest is history. This guy is one of those divine, where the Lord said, you know what, I'm going to show off a little bit. I'm going to drop somebody in your life that it's going to blow your mind. So my friend Johnny. John lives in Clarksville for over 30 years. He's been selling athletic gear all over the country. And his parent company happens to be based out of here. Fruit.
Well,
right?
I sold Russell.
Yeah,
I sold a lot of Russell uniforms
yeah.
over the years. So I had to come here every now and then for a sales meeting.
So was in Reno, Nevada for most of his career. Recently moved to Clarksville. Just has a passion for men to build men. And so I thought tonight we'd have the opportunity before Jeff comes up to I'm telling you, you need to hear some of the things this guy's going to share in the next few minutes. I wanted to give him that opportunity. Brought a couple guys with him tonight back here as well. John is investing in men in Clarksville. He's trying to build difference makers. He's pouring what's in his bucket into others, and he got some stuff in his bucket. So John and I immediately, when you and I started to connect, I immediately saw that you understood the significance of men investing in each other.
Absolutely.
And then you went on to tell me a story about how 3 older guys changed John England's life. So I'm going to let you just kind of take it from here, and you'll understand John's not short on words, okay? So you need to...
Well, we're going to try to keep it quick.
Yeah. So anyway, I want you to hear from my brother John for a minute. So
it's a worthy question. Why get involved in men's lives? You're looking at the result of 3 men in 1989 that walked up to me, and I did not really know any of them. They attended our church, but I had just been literally cut in half as a man. The kingdom that I was building was being taken away. The marriage that I thought would never end was being taken away. I didn't even know if I was going to have my 3 little kids anymore. You've seen that show, Naked and Afraid? Well, like Adam, after the fall, I was naked and ashamed. I couldn't hide what was going on in my life. I couldn't pretend that it was not destroying me and killing me. I was scared to death. Everything I knew as identity, I'd wrapped myself in, and get this, it was full-time Christian work, being a sports ambassador, missionary to the baseball world. People called us the Ken and Barbie family with 3 little kids. Everything was great, and then all of a sudden, 2 words changed all that. I'm done. And I asked her, you're done with shopping? You're done with the dishes? You're done? No, I'm done with you. I'm done with the ministry. And I got to make up for lost time. And by the way, I'm in love with one of your friends. Gentlemen, if it hasn't happened to you, I hope and pray it never does, but I can flat out tell you, I know you can understand how that would cut a man in half. And it did. And I'm a Christian, and I love the Lord, and I'm in full-time vocational service, and I'm a wreck. And 3 men quietly walked up to me, one out of the gate, and he said, "My name's Terry Raitt, John. I know you don't know me, but I go to your church, and I am telling you that I am committing my life to you for as long as it takes until you get better. And I'm going to bring some other guys along with me." One of them happened to be an older man, older than Terry, who had built into Terry's life and had challenged Terry to seek me out, to pass on what Terry had been given to somebody else. And then that group, those 3 men, grew to 6, and at a quiet kitchen table, before the movie ever came out, Zero Dark 30, we met at 5:30 in the morning. 6 men huddled around a table, and we opened up the Word. We opened up our lives, got honest, got transparent. And I'm here today because of that. The lead critter was named Paul Stanley. Paul had been an Army football player, decorated Vietnam officer, a missionary with the Navigators into Eastern Europe, was living in Colorado Springs. He took the next step and he said, "John, why don't you spend the weekend with us so we can pray together and I can help you through this." That weekend became living with him and my kids for a year for nothing. And during that year, he and those other men lived out what I believe today is the greatest verse for a man as far as a mission you could ever have. It's in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and it says, "Encourage the faint-hearted." I was so faint-hearted then, I couldn't even breathe on my own. I had no future. I was devastated, I was lost. And Paul Stanley, Terry Raitt, and a brother named Brent became the 3 guys that literally walked with me for the next 1.5 years, 2 years. Helped me become a single dad. Listen to my tears. Listen to my heartaches. Helped me pray for the restoration of my marriage, which didn't happen. But one day, as I walked on, I simply said to Paul, "I promise you, Paul Stanley, this. What you and the rest of the guys have done in my life, I will do until God takes me home." And last year, Paul went home to be with the Lord. And I got to be in his memorial service and see it. Hundreds of men, national, world ministry leaders. Paul was a Hall of Famer when it came to ministry. And who was I? Just some 35-year-old single dad that got to live inside his house for a year and became friends. But out of that, he gave me a mission and a calling. And gentlemen, I can tell you one thing, and I'd say this. You are all older men to somebody. You 60, 65, 70-year-old guys, you got a lot of people you can be older men to. You 30-year-old guys, I'll show you a group of 12-year-olds in my Sunday school class you could be an older man to, and they need it more than ever. 12-year-olds are going to our public schools and being challenged on whether they're a boy or a girl. Am I not? They're being assaulted. And they need an older man in their life that'll pour into them and tell them the truth of God's word, that they're created special, that they have a mission, they have a future. And if you're 40, you're 50, again, you just look down line and you've got somebody that you can be an older man to. And you can do what Paul Stanley, Terry Raitt, and Brent Williams did for me. And yes, I'm doing now for other guys until he takes me home. And I can tell you this, there is no greater conversation that you can have as a man than a conversation with another man that involves eternity. You can talk about football till you're blue in the face. You can talk about whether the Braves are going to win it all or not. Big deal. Really, compared to a conversation where you could share with a fellow man how the God of this world has loved them, has created them, has sent his son to die for them, and has a plan and a hope for their lives. You want to get on a tsunami? Get involved in one of those conversations. I know some of you have. All I am saying, keep talking. It would be a shame for what God poured into me. And I know, looking out here, somebody has poured into your life, a dad. But as I say as a dad, I am thankful for the other older men in my son's life who have poured into him. Because a dad is a dad, and that's good. We can talk. But man, an older man, whew, wow. So I'm hooked up with this guy because I know he wants, until the day he dies, to pass on what God has so graciously given him through Bob Warren, so many other guys, some of you guys that are his buddies. We're just in this together. One beggar telling another beggar where we found bread and giving young men hope. You know this? I'll close with this. I had a group similar to Robert and Greg that met. I had 3 20-year-olds at my table for a year and a half, and I asked them one day, I said, what do you fear? Get this. They said, we are afraid that we can't trust Google. And I said, what? What do you mean you can't trust Google? You can get anything off Google. And he says, yes, but is it the truth? We want to have a real live person across the table that we can have a conversation with and say, how did you get through a tough marriage time? How did you buy a house? How did you fix a pipe? Did you ever struggle with pornography and still love Jesus at the same time? Fellas, that one blew me away. It was like these kids, and I call you guys kids, the young ones. You are. Some of you I could have had as sons. That'd been a good thing. We'd have had a lot of fun together. They want a real life. And gentlemen, especially you older guys, man, what a joy to do that and be that and just pass it down. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you all for being here. I'm just very humbled to be here with you and to share a few thoughts. I appreciate Tim reaching out and inviting me a couple of months ago. He was in my office, and as he said, when you're 6'4", 300, you can't just walk in and buy clothes. And so I've told him for years, I've got 2 options, Tim. I can go to Omar and get my clothes, the tent maker, or I can come to you. And I've been with him for about 25 years or so, and appreciate the friendship that we have. And it's good to see some friends that I have here. I want to share with you a message. You've heard a little bit about it. And I like to say the title of my message is, I'm Glad It Happened. And it's a personal story. But before I share that, I want to ask each of you a question. Have you ever been through a storm in your life? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but if you're sitting there, have you ever been through the death of a family member that I know someone like Doug Gorman experienced? And I can't imagine that. But a circumstance in your personal life, maybe financial or the health of someone close to you, maybe a marital situation with your spouse, and you're going through that and it's a difficult time. And you think, I have nowhere to go. I have nowhere to turn. And you think to yourself, I just can't take this anymore. And maybe you had thoughts of how can I just end it all? How can I end it all? That's where I was at one time. I was in that place. And so that's the story I want to share. It's not about me, but I want to share that story to share with you what Jesus Christ in your life can do when you're facing those storms, when you're in the midst of that turmoil, when you're in that difficult situation, what he can do, what he did for me, what he can do for you, what he can do for people that you're going to mentor, other men, as we face those circumstances. 4 years ago yesterday, actually, October the 17th, 2017, I began going through the worst time in my life. It was the worst time in the life of my wife of now 30 years. It was the worst time in the lives of our 3 daughters. The worst time in the life of my family. And to tell you why it was bad, I lost 40 pounds in 30 days. I wasn't on faster way to fat loss. I wasn't on anything like that. I lost 40 pounds in 30 days. I was physically sick. I had symptoms of a heart attack one evening at home. And I was rushed to the Russell County Hospital, taken to Lexington, all the symptoms of a heart attack. I spent 2.5 days at Central Baptist in Lexington thinking I'd had a heart attack, but I hadn't. You know what the diagnosis was? The symptoms of broken heart syndrome. I'd never heard of it, but it was a real thing. Emotionally, I was mad, I was angry, I was embarrassed, I was hurt, I was disappointed, I was depressed, I felt guilt, I felt all of those emotions. But today and tonight, I can stand here and I can tell you, because of the love of Jesus Christ, because of the grace that he showed me, the mercy, his forgiving spirit, I can stand here tonight and tell you that that circumstance, that storm that I went through, I'm glad it happened because it changed my life. And don't misunderstand me. I wouldn't want my worst enemy to go through that. I wouldn't want my worst enemy's family to go through what my family went through. But for me, for Jeff Hoover, I'm glad it happened. And I'm going to share that with you. So on October the 17th, 2017, I was Speaker of the House in Kentucky. And I got a letter from an attorney in Louisville who was accusing myself, some other legislators, and the chief of staff that I had hired for us in Frankfort of sexual harassment and discrimination. I was crushed. I was devastated. Many of the things that were in that letter I disagreed with, and the context in which they were presented, they just weren't true. But my world was rocked. It was turned upside down. Fast forward 8 days later, everybody had lawyered up, and we had a mediation in Lexington, and we resolved it with me specifically, denying that there was sexual harassment. But I want to be clear, I had made some mistakes. I had done some things that were inappropriate, that were wrong, that I was embarrassed about. They had happened 1.5 years earlier, but nevertheless, I had done them and I was wrong. 8 days later, after being notified, we reached a confidential, non-disclosure settlement regarding those allegations. We reached that settlement in an effort to protect our families, to save them from the continued public shame and embarrassment that we felt. And I left Lexington that afternoon on October the 25th. We'd been there all day. We had signed the confidentiality agreement. We had signed the non-disclosure. I left there. I drove home to my home in Jamestown 1 hour and 45 minutes later. And as I pull in my driveway, my attorney in Lexington called and said, "You're not going to believe this, but it's already been leaked to the press. They already know about it. They're already calling." Thanks, Tim. I was under a confidentiality. I couldn't say anything. I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to honor that agreement. I couldn't talk. But the press began calling every day, several times a day, for a week. And then on November the 1st, a week later, I woke up that Thursday morning to the front page of the Louisville Courier-Journal. Speaker settles sexual harassment case. No mention of the other folks involved or anything. But the story then was the lead story, and some of you may recall, on every television station, it was on every radio station, and every newspaper. It was on Fox News about the Speaker of the House in Kentucky had settled a sexual harassment claim. Immediately, some of the folks that I had become dear friends with, I thought, some of the folks that I had helped over the years that I was close to, began using what had happened for their own political benefit. I was devastated. I was as low as I could get. Steve Sheldon was there. He knows what happened. 3 days later, in the midst of all that, I resigned as Speaker of the House. You see, being Speaker of the House is what I thought, what Jeff Hoover thought that I had to do. It's what I thought I was supposed to do. I thought it was my calling in life. If you read Tim's book, which I highly recommend, Tim lays it out in there, is that I thought what I did was who I was. And I thought being Speaker of the House was what I was supposed to do. I had served for 16 years as a Republican floor leader in Frankfort. I'd traveled all across the state, recruiting candidates, raising money, and all the time folks were saying, we've got to become the majority in the Kentucky House so you'll be Speaker. I mean, I thought that's who I was. I thought it defined me. And then in November of 2016, it happened. And the Republicans, the party of which I'm a member, became the majority. 2 months later, I was sworn in as Speaker, the first Republican Speaker in 100 years. I was doing what I had dreamed of. I was doing what I had worked for. You hear what I'm saying? I was doing what I thought I needed to be doing. The focus was on me. I was doing what folks were telling me I needed to do. And again, Jeff Hoover was focusing on what Jeff Hoover thought he ought to be doing, what was my plan. But God had a different plan. God had a different plan. And it's like he said, and I've shared this with Tim, it's like he said, whoa, big boy, you thought this was all about you and you becoming Speaker, and you've been ignoring me, and I'm going to get your attention. And I had been ignoring my faith. I was still going through the motions. I was going to church. I was teaching my Sunday school class, but I was going through the motions. And it was like he was saying, you think that who you know and what you do, you always wanted to do, you think that's what's important, but that's not what's important. And so you may be sitting there saying, well, why are you glad it happened? Your dream, all that you'd worked for 16 or 17 years, was now shattered. You had physical health issues of losing 40 pounds in 30 days and all the problems that come with that. 2 different hospitalizations, thinking I had a heart attack. I had emotional health issues, obviously issues with my spouse now. I had let my 3 daughters down, the pride of my life. And they were teenagers and in college, and they had to see all that. And I tell you, I'm glad it happened because God used that storm to change my life. He used that storm to change the life of my beautiful, loving wife of 30 years, to change her life. He used that storm, I'm telling you, to change the life of my daughters, all for the better. And so I stand here tonight and I give him the glory for what he did through that most difficult time. And today my faith is stronger, my marriage is stronger, my family is stronger, my relationships is stronger because I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I didn't like going through the fire. I didn't like going through the storm, but tonight, today, and every day, I now celebrate the result of what happened. And I give him the glory and the praise for that. And I want to share 3 brief stories about how God works when we call on him, when we're going through those difficult times, whatever it may be. And when we turn it over to him, I want to share what happened to me. 3 different little stories. So the first 3 weeks, as I said, I didn't get out of the house. I'm an attorney in Jamestown. I have a law office, very active court practice. But for 3 solid weeks, I was in the fetal position in the floor or on the couch. My wife was a teacher. She would get up and go to school. I don't know how she did it. And I would lay there feeling sorry for myself, wallowing around in self-pity. As I said, I didn't eat, and I lost 40 pounds in 30 days. And one Saturday, my wife comes in. It's about 3 weeks after being in the newspaper. It'd been on Fox News. It'd been everywhere. My wife comes in, and she sort of put her foot down. She said, "Get up. We're going to Lexington. I'm going shopping. We're going to go out to eat." Now, where we live, you got 2 choices. You can come to Bowling Green or Lexington. That particular day, she picked Lexington. And I said, I don't want to go. I'm afraid I will see someone. I'm afraid I'll go into a restaurant as I'm accustomed to doing, and someone would come up to me. I'm too embarrassed. I have too much shame. I just don't want to do it. She made me get up and go. And all the way up there, I'm thinking, I'm not going into the mall. I'm not going to go somewhere and eat. And so we began praying together about 30 miles out. And I was praying, God, I want you to give me something, show me something, help me get out of this situation that I'm in mentally, physically, emotionally. And so I had her to take me to Lifeway Christian Bookstore there next to Fayette Mall. Some of you may know where it is. And we prayed that I would find something that would give me some comfort and some peace. And I walk in, and as I walk in on the second row, there's this book. And it's not turned like that, on a bookshelf. It just happened to be the only book on that bookshelf that was turned like that. And that book looked bright orange to me. It was like it was glaring in my face. I can't explain it other than to tell you it just looked bright orange, like it was glowing. And I walk over to it, and it's a book by David Jeremiah. Some of you are familiar with him. It's called A Bend in the Road, Experiencing God When Your World Falls Apart. I'm like, oh my gosh. The title, if nothing else, is exactly where I am. And so I picked up that book, and I sat down and I began reading it, and I said, this is me. My world had fallen apart. I didn't think there was a bend in the road. I thought it was a dead-end cliff. That's the emotion, that was the mental state that I was in. And I started reading that book, and I finished it about 2 o'clock that morning. But 3 things in this book jumped out at me. I had prayed for God to show me something in that bookstore, and that's what I was led to, this glowing orange book. 3 things. For the humble who within hearts of desperation come with their heads bowed, seeking God's forgiveness, He provides shelter. I was desperate. And I sought His forgiveness. The second thing, peace and prosperity have never provided effective classrooms, but crisis and catastrophe, on the other hand, provide master's degrees. I was going through the crisis and the catastrophe, And the third thing from that book, no matter what, when you are in the midst, deep in the midst of trouble, you must never forget that God is still busy working in you. And here I was going through this storm, through this challenge, this crisis in our personal lives, but it was an opportunity to grow in my faith. And James, in chapter 1, verse 2, James says, "Count it all joy when trouble comes." James doesn't say if it comes. He doesn't say maybe it will come. He says when it comes. And to follow up on what John says, if you haven't experienced it, God bless you and be thankful. But it's probably coming in your life, some catastrophe, some crisis, some problem, some challenge, some circumstance that you will consider in your life a storm. The second story I'll share is about my wife. She and I had been praying for months and months that God would show us his will for our lives and for God to show us how he could use us. And we had been to marital counseling, spiritual-based marital counseling. I didn't think I would ever go. I'll be honest. I didn't think 6'4", 300-pound guy who's always been in control of everything in his life, I didn't think I would go. I went. It was one of the best things I ever did. And my wife and I learned, and we had never prayed together, and we learned through that counseling how to do that. And she began praying for God to show us what you want us to do. Our church in Russell Springs, First Baptist Church, began a ministry called Celebrate Recovery. And my wife became involved and more involved. And it's something that she is very passionate about to this day. God has opened that door to provide her that opportunity to minister to other people who have been through similar situations. And I'll fast forward to September of 2019. I had known for some time I was not going to seek re-election. I'd been in Frankfort for, at that time, 23 years. Some people might say it's 22 years too long. But I'd been there for 23 years. I knew I wasn't going to seek re-election, and we were praying, when do we make the announcement? And I shared this with Tim earlier. It was on a Thursday night, late September, and my wife and I were home, and I said, I'm just ready to make the announcement. I'm not going to run again. And so I go to my office the next day. I prepared the little press release to send to my local media at home. And I told my secretary, so we're going to send that out first thing Monday morning. Well, here it was Friday afternoon, and my two oldest daughters come home from Lexington. My youngest daughter was in homecoming at our high school, and they came in to see her. It was about 5:30 that Friday afternoon, and I tell my three daughters that I've decided not to run again. And you have to understand, I've been there 23 years. My daughters are 26 at that time, 26, 22, and 16. All they had ever known was Dad being in Frankfort all the time. That's all they had ever known. They grew up with it. And so here on this Friday afternoon at 5:30, I tell them, I'm not going to run. And my oldest daughter says, well, Dad, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And my response was, well, Mom and I have been praying, and we've been asking God to show us some ways and open some doors and some opportunities that we can serve him. Now, that was at 5:30 that afternoon. We go to that high school football game. About 6:15, I walk through the gate. And as I'm walking through, this friend of mine from high school yells at me. And she comes up to me and she says, what are you doing next Sunday? I go, I don't know. She said, it's homecoming at our church. And she was very involved politically. She knew my story. She knew everything that had happened. She said, we want you to come to our church and talk to us and share a message. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So I went a couple of Sundays later, but I said, it's a God thing. We had said, we're just told our daughters 45 minutes earlier, we're looking for opportunities and God's going to lead us. And then the first thing that happens when we go to the football game is this lady asked me to come and speak at her church. And so I went. 2 days later, they asked me to come back the following Sunday. So I go. They had a part-time pastor who filled the pulpit every other Sunday. About a week later, they called and said our part-time pastor had taken a full-time job, and we want you to come every Sunday. And I said, I'm not a pastor, but I'll be happy to come and share a message. Now, this time, it's about the end of October. I said, I'll do that till the end of the year. That'll give you all a couple of months to find someone. They didn't find anyone. January 1st rolled around, I was still there. And I'm saying, are you looking for anyone? Oh, yeah, we haven't found anyone. Bottom line, I stayed there for almost a year, a little over 10 months. And I share that story simply not about what I did, but when we were praying for God to show us opportunities, He opened that door wide open and said, here it is. And so I did the best I could. I kept saying, you've got to find somebody full time, and they finally did. And the third story I'll share with you in praying for God to show us what to do. During this time, several months had passed, and I was driving home from Frankfurt one day, and I come to the stoplight in Harrodsburg, and some of you may know where that is. I was turning left on 27 to go to Danville, and over here across the way is Campbellsville University. And I can't explain it other than it was a God thing. He just told me you need to enroll in school. This is Friday about 12 noon. You need to enroll. And I prayed about that for the next hour and 15 minutes as I drove home. And I was as convinced as anything, Doug, that that's what I needed to do. And I walk into my law office that afternoon. I call Campbellsville University. The president of the university is a personal friend of mine. He was at that time president. And I said, Dr. Carter, I just feel like I need to enroll in class in the theology program. And he said, oh, well, that's great news. And I said, I know it's too late probably to get started this semester, but, I'd just like to get some information and get things moving. Now, this is about 2 or 2:30 on Friday. 15 minutes later, the dean calls me and says, we've got a class starting Monday night at Harrodsburg campus. We would love to have you there. And I said, well, I haven't even applied yet. He said, Dr. Carter says he will meet with you this weekend to fill out the application for the Master's in Theology program. Dr. Carter met with me that weekend in Jamestown. I filled it out. I show up, and on Monday, I'm like, I am 58 years old. I'm going to college. I'm going to pursue a master's. And so before I go, I call and I say, what about books? Dr. Carter calls back and said, the books will be in the classroom waiting on you. They're taken care of. So one of your friends, I was sharing with him this weekend what you were doing. Everything's taken care of. So I've taken one class in the Master's in Theology at Campbellsville University due to COVID and some other things. I'm waiting to take my second one. I figure I've got nothing else to do now, so I've got 9 more classes to go. But I share that with you that when we ask God and when we trust Him, He will provide opportunities for us to grow in our faith and in our relationship with me, with Him. And He did it for me, and He'll do it for you. And so in closing, I'll say this. We've all been through tough times. We've all been through difficult circumstances. We've all made mistakes and done things probably that we're not happy about or not proud of. Yours probably was never on the front page of the Courier-Journal or the Herald Leader, probably not on every television station in Kentucky and radio station, probably not on Fox News as mine was. But you know what? Tonight, I can tell you that it doesn't matter. That's all in the past. That was a different Jeff Hoover, because Jesus Christ has already paid for that in full. He's forgiven me. His mercy, His love. And when we accept Him as our Lord and Savior, when we put our faith in Him, when we put our trust in Him, we are forgiven. It's gone, what we did in the past. It's over. We're new creatures. We're redeemed, and as He says, set apart by the blood of Christ. And it doesn't matter what happened or has happened, but we cannot experience the glory of Christ with our head in the sand. I struggled for a long time about what I had done. I was worried about, what folks thought about me. I was worried about, quote, my friends. I was worried about me instead of focusing on what Jesus had done for me. And so I'm glad that the storm I went through stripped me away of everything that I thought I needed. I thought I needed to be Speaker of the House. I thought I might have a future someday for some other political office. But the storm in my life stripped that all away. And I can tell you tonight that I'm glad it did, because it made me realize what I really needed. I needed Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I needed to refocus my priorities. And now it's all about faith, family, and friends. That's it. That's what it's about. And listen, if you hear nothing else, listen to this. I'm glad it happened, because I truly believe when we as men understand that God is positioning us in our lives to use us for His glory, when we understand that and accept that and the roles that we have in our community, in our homes, we won't care what people say. We won't care what people think. So why do I share this story? It's not about me. It's not about Jeff Hoover. But my wife told me early on, she said, Satan had a plot, but God has a plan. And I'm so blessed with a wife like that. But she told me early on, said, Satan in Frankfurt had a plan, had a plot, but God has a plan for you. So I am living, breathing, talking proof that no matter what you've done in your life, no matter what you've been through, no matter what's in your past, wherever you are in life, whatever the crisis may be, know that Jesus Christ loves you. He died for you, and whatever it is that you're going through or will go through, take it to Him and He will carry you through it. When all this was going on and I was in Frankfurt, Steve knows I became a recluse. I mean, I'd been there 22 years. I'd been in leadership 20 years. And now that I was out, I felt lost. I felt I had nothing to do. And I would sit in my office or at my apartment by myself. And a song that was very popular then that I listen to all the time now was by Crowder. And I don't know if any of you like Crowder. He's my favorite artist. But all my hope is in Jesus. Thank God that yesterday is gone. All my sins are forgiven. I've been washed in the blood. So whatever you're going through, Jesus said, come to me, all who are weary and carrying burdens. And what did He say? I will give you rest. I can tell you from my experience, that promise is true. And He will do it today for you. And when your storm is over, you will be a new person. You will have a peace and a comfort that you can't even understand. And you will be able to say, I believe, just like I'm able to say, when that storm is over and you've been in his hands, I'm glad it happened. I'm glad it happened because it changed my life.